Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
Welcome everyone to this podcast. With every episode we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. And it's all about helping you as a professional, where you make the choices that affect you in the classroom for the betterment of your students. We hope to open some doors for you to make those choices. Using the fullness of the Australian curriculum, we believe great teaching can never be packaged into a program. Quality children's literature surrounds our students but is also central to our teaching. And a new one today, it's about developing reader and writer actions, Sharon, and an entry point for every child.
I know, more than one idea, but there are things. Yeah. It's nice. I like the way you're incorporating some of those key elements that we're just talking about all the time. You know, we really do bring that idea. You know, it is in the fullness of the Australian curriculum. We can't do this without, you know, good literature. Literature is, we can only teach as well as the literature that we bring to students and that surrounds them. And this one that you've talked about, really talking about specifically today, but what we need our readers and writers active. We need them bringing that fullness of the curriculum to their reading and writing and being active in talking about, in thinking about, in using strategies, using skills, using all those things that we're teaching. Sorry, Phil, I realise I'm going into a podcast here rather than just doing the introduction, but great addition. Reader and writer actions, and that in our teaching we are providing an entry point for every child.
And what I didn't mention was a workshop model approach, which allows all those things to happen.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which we emphasise throughout our different podcasts.
Yeah, because the workshop is that very thing that allows our students to be active. Because in a workshop, no matter what subject area that's in or what learning area that's in, if we get to see demonstrations of how that works within the real task, once we get to see it, that's what the workshop model does. We get to see it, and then there's the opportunity for us to apply it with the expert guiding us.
Fantastic. And at the time of recording our podcast, there's over 10,800 downloads of the Teacher's Toolkit podcast, which is fabulous.
Yes,
fantastic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I think this is the brilliant podcast.
So, and welcome newcomers. Please join our Facebook group if you haven't already, and sign up for the newsletter, which comes out every week. All right. And Sharon, what's been happening in schools?
Oh, so this week in 2 lots of schools over this past week, I just wanted to bring forward really probably something for, we talk about our podcast is for motivated teachers and leaders. And I really just wanted to highlight that in both of these examples, especially for our motivated leaders, the kinds of models that schools are using to drive professional learning in their schools. So in one of the schools, actually in both schools, but I'll just do them school by school. So at Mount Barker South, we had we'd scheduled and planned, so the literacy coach and principal and I had planned the lessons that I would demonstrate across a range of classrooms in that day. And so not only did I, and that we wanted in particular the focus to be on reading strategies and then conferring with readers. What would that look like? So that became a focus. And whilst I gave everyone an observation sheet, my planning was specifically around particular reading strategies within a workshop model. So I did a mini lesson, modelled the mini lesson, students reading independently, and whilst they were reading independently that I would confer. And then we finished with the share. But just going back to this model of what we did, so I did the demonstration lessons and a number of teachers were observing, and then there was an opportunity to debrief for a lesson with the teacher whose room I did the demonstration and with the other teachers that were watching. And all along the day, the literacy coach in the school was side by side with me, learning more about the coaching process and for her own classroom, the reading conference process. And at the end of the day, we had a staff meeting that focused just around reading conferences, and that included a professional reading, discussion in teams, and then a question and answer format where they could ask more about how does it work, all those kinds of things. So that's what a day of learning looked like. And I want to, really sort of draw that parallel with it was a workshop model. People got to see and engage with and do just the kinds of things that we would do in a workshop with our students.
Yep.
And at Ross Trevor too, at Ross Trevor College in the junior school, I love the way that we were able to, I've been working with Reception 1, 2, 3 teachers, and this last week we had the opportunity for the year 4, 5, 6 teachers to come and observe during a lesson, to have time with us together for conversations after those observations, where more readings and more learning were done. So it was that wonderful workshop approach to learning that we talk about for classrooms, but that's an approach that we can use in our professional learning as well. So I just wanted to highlight that, how that's played out this week across 2 schools in the way that we're working with adult learners as well as student learners.
Yeah, because it's all about learning, isn't it? So that same model of learning that happens with the students in the classroom also plays out as adults when we're doing PD. So
yes,
it's a just similar or same process.
Yes, and a really and an active process.
Yep.
It's not just people demonstrating. So at Ross Trevor, I wasn't doing the demonstrating. The teachers were doing and were sharing their learning and what they were doing. And so as a community of learners, this is the other piece.
Together?
Just like when we do that with a class, this was, at a school level as a community of learners together, we're all on this this journey of learning. So, so it's not that it was an unusual week, because that's the model of learning we're always focusing on, but it was just such a powerful model that I just wanted to share as an example of how it aligns with learning. And you summed that up very well, and I've just rambled on forever afterwards.
That's fantastic. I didn't, in our chatty rambles, talk about our recent poetry shopping. When we went off to look for poems and found some great ones at the local bookshop.
Yes, although you did find that it wasn't a huge collection.
No, it was only one shelf of poetry books for children.
For children.
You found more at another bookshop?
Oh, well, I also went book shopping,
Yeah.
poetry shopping, and I went to Oxfam, which is second-hand books. But once again, they are just extraordinary in the way they organise it all, like a bookshop does. So the children's poetry section, I have to say, I pretty much bought everything that they had on the shelf, which was which actually wasn't a huge collection.
No.
But I also did go looking, in so they are anthologies, but of course there are books that are poems of themselves. So anyway, I know that you read this poem out when you got home.
Because I found this wonderful book called The Caribbean Dozen, Poems from 13 Caribbean Poets. Now, did you know, Sharon, that a Caribbean dozen is 13, not 12?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's why they call it the Caribbean Dozen.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, how gorgeous.
Yeah, so
So it isn't just a baker's dozen.
it says full of amazing sights, sounds, smells and rhythms of the Caribbean. This cornerstone anthology is inspired by the childhood memories of 13 poets, in brackets, a Caribbean dozen.
Oh, how glorious.
Anyway, I'll move on to the one poem that I thought, I'll just read one poem that I thought was really great.
And poet?
The poet is James Berry.
Wonderful.
Nobody can see my name on me. My name is inside and all over me, unseen, like other people also keep it. Isn't my name magical? My name is mine only. It tells I am individual, the one special person it shakes when I'm wanted. Even if someone else answers for me, my message hangs in air, haunting others till it stops with me, the right name. Isn't your name and my name magic? If I'm with hundreds of people and my name gets called, my sound switches me on to answer, like it was my human electricity. My name echoes across playground. It comes. It demands my attention. I have to find out who calls, who wants me for what. My name gets blurted out in class. It is terror at a bad time because somebody is cross. My name gets called in a whisper. I'm happy because my name may have touched me with a loving voice. Isn't your name and my name magic?
Indeed it is. I love that. As soon as you read that out, and it's in the reading out, isn't it?
Yes, the sounds of it.
The hearing, that we both just said, oh, now that really means something to me.
Yeah.
Wonderful one to bring to our students. But inside the covers of books, what poetry is there for us to explore? So thank you for sharing your bit of poetry shopping this week.
A pleasure. Now, after a big long intro, we've got our topic, which is all about reading conferences.
Yes.
And what's the struggle here with reading conferences,
Right.
Sharon?
So, and just I've intentionally chosen reading conferences just on their own. We could talk about, because there is conferring with our readers and our writers, can be in the same sort of format, but I've really wanted to just go with the reading conference so that we can spend the time really focusing on not only how that works, but the what of the reading conference. Because I know for teachers, and that's why we spent and why we are spending not only just last week's session with Mount Barker South teachers, we're not just exploring it on that day, we're really looking at it to how does it work and how can I use it to learn more about what my readers are doing. Because the struggle is so how can we get that information? How can we really find out what readers are doing, what actions readers are taking? And so therefore what good reader strategies and actions and skills do they have that we can and don't have, so that we know what to teach to help them be more active and more successful and to grow as readers. So there's probably kind of two ways that we gather information about our readers outside of a conference, and we can get some of that information from, we have some testing platforms that give us some information. So a question and answer type, multiple choice type response. But that isn't letting us have our eyes and ears on what the student is doing as they are reading. That's only giving us information
After they've read.
After they've read. It actually it doesn't give us insights into their thinking processes, their actions. So what they're choosing and using to do as a reader.
As they read.
Yep. And so then many people will also use running records to help them find out about their students as readers, and that is a process where we are looking and listening to find out what students are doing as they're reading. So running records can also form part of a reading conference, but I really want to, I guess when we're talking in the struggle, that some people say, by the time I do a running record on every child, that takes a long time, and to analyse that. So we really want to talk about the reading conference as an integral part of our reading workshop. So whilst our students are reading, that's our time. A reading conference is really an opportunity to not only find out more, but to do some teaching right there and then, and also to help us find out a bit more about what it is that we need to be teaching. What do our readers need? Because a reading conference should be what we would refer to as transformative tracking, in finding out about our students, what are we going to bring in our mini lessons and in our on-the-spot teaching then? How's that going to be transformed into something that those students will transform as an action into their reading?
Yep. So it's my question though is with teachers doing their running records, that it was people trying to formalise the process, and programs were written to try and make it more formal.
Programs or resources?
Resources,
maybe.
I suppose, yeah, were written to. And the end result of that was to get a number to find out what level the child was at. And sometimes that takes over the whole, that becomes much more of a bigger thing than the actual reading conference itself.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point, and a good thing that I will just explore before we move on is that a running record now most often is associated with students, to find out at what level a child is reading. And that came at a time when Marie Clay attached that process of what was called a running record, which was really to find out what a student was doing as they were reading, and then in the analysis looking at, were they making, what cues were they using? Were they using meaning making and visual strategies? And did it look right? Did it sound right? Did it make sense? Strategies. And then it was and we use that in an assessment format to find out, to give us a guide at what level a child is reading. Before running records and before that formalisation of it, which I guess you're really referring to by programming it or structuring it.
Yep.
Before that, it was really that talk about miscue analysis. So the miscues, if we look at what a student is doing as they're reading and looking at what miscues they make, that will let us know where it is that we need to help them as a reader so that we can respond to that. So that's exactly what we're really drawing on in terms of a reading conference, that we're thinking about what is it that they are doing, that they aren't yet doing, and what do we need to teach them? What are we bringing? What actions are we bringing to them so that they can be more effective as a reader?
So we're talking about the teacher becoming much more owning this process themselves and making it theirs, whereas when running records were formalised into resources, it kind of took away that from teachers a bit?
Yes. So that's the key point there is that when we are doing a reading conference with a child, we're doing that with the book that they are reading at that time. So their Just Right book, that is part of their ongoing reading. We're using that. We're not choosing the text for them to read from for us to do the conference around that particular text. We're conferring around the text that they are currently working with.
So a bit of gold there, Sharon, isn't it? That when we say, fill your classroom with tantalising texts, a classroom library, well, these texts can be used for independent reading, but they're also the texts that you're using when you're conferring with a child. So,
well, that's
instead of
that's the logic. That's how am I going to find out? This is what I want to find out. What are students doing with the books that they are reading?
Yeah. Instead of what I'm saying is for the teachers who think, might be thinking that we go to a separate kit to get the texts or the cards that we're going to use for finding out about those children.
We can still use that to find out if we need to place them at a particular, if we want to get a more standard assessment on that, and we want to find out at what particular level they might be operating. But in our day-to-day, we need to know day-to-day what students are doing.
Yes, it's because it's every day that we're conferring with the children.
Yes.
So
and this is going to raise so let's start exploring some of this because I think, when we start talking about the struggle, and this is even, one of the big questions, at the school the other day was, so how do we do this? How do we fit this all in? So that's what we really want to explore in this podcast. So some of those.
My question is, how do we manage all this?
Well, how about we just go back right to the beginning?
Right.
Oh, well, not to the beginning, but
semi-beginning.
Just to be as a podcast, for it to be useful, if I can sort of have a little bit of structure around the what is conferring, and then what is it that we're looking for during a conference, and so and what can be a bit of a plan for a highly effective reading conference.
And some tools.
Because there is. Yeah.
Right.
So reading conferences.
What are they?
So a reading conference is really an assessment for teaching and learning. So it's an opportunity to gather information to not only teach but for learning, because if we say it's just for teaching, we need it transformed. And this is, it's purposeful. It's into action for the student. So it's a learning piece. So, but a reading conference is a meeting between a student and a teacher, during which time a teacher tries to learn as much about the student's reading. So that's the focus, to learn as much about the students' reading, and including things like, what are their reading interests? What are their reading processes? And so right now we want to start linking this for us in Australia, so to the Australian curriculum, what reading processes is the student using, including what are their monitoring strategies. So in the Australian curriculum, it will talk about what cues they're using, so the 3 cueing system, and their monitoring strategies. We want to know about their comprehension. We want to know about their fluency, their vocabulary, their decoding knowledge. So lots of reading process, comprehension, and what interests them as a reader. What makes them as a reader? Why have they chosen this book? What other books have, trying to help them not only in their reading but in moving forward in reading into a range of reading, as well as what they're doing with this book, but further, beyond that. So
that's what it is.
That's what it is. And it's an intentional part of our teaching and learning. It's not I might do that every now and then. The reading conference is really part of my everyday time as students are reading independently. This is my chance to sit in with different children and plan to do that, so that I'm finding out as much as I can about my readers, to not only help them there and then, but really to inform what is it that I also need to be teaching my students in my mini lessons. So my conferences are highly highly critical in also informing, because we said they're assessment for teaching and learning. What is it that I need to be teaching? We need to look against the Australian curriculum, and then for reading, what do my students need?
Yep. And so what actions are we actually looking for?
Yes. So we can, and this is why we want to be looking at students and learning about them as they're reading. So what actions? So there's 5 really good questions that we can be thinking about, and I'll refer to these again, but these are actions that we're talking about. So I said we want to know about what they do, in their reading, what reading processes, their comprehension, but we want to ask, what strategies do they use to help their reading?
Yep.
So we should be able to be looking for, I can see that they're doing this. This is what's helping their reading. Not just that they're doing it, but what if they stop? What if they reread? That's a strategy they're using to help them as readers. So we're really looking in at what do we see that they're using that helps them as a reader. Sometimes we see children using strategies that aren't helping them as a reader. So little man that I was conferring with the other day, and we said he came to a word that he didn't know. And I said, so what do you do what strategies have you got? What do you do when you come to a word you don't know? And that's actually one of the other questions we want to ask. But we want to find out, what do they know that they can do that helps them? If they haven't got other things to help them, then that's what we want to teach them to do. So what strategies do they use to help their reading? What do they know about comprehension strategies? So we might say, sometimes when I say to a teacher, choose me a child that you want me to confer with, and they'll say, this child, because they can read every word, but they don't seem to know what they're reading. Well, what does that child know about comprehension strategies? What does that child know about what they can do to make meaning from what they're reading? So that's a critical part. If they don't know what to do to make sense of what they're reading, right there's a strategy. And as a class, that's something I'd be absolutely focusing in on, is teaching comprehension strategies,
That's your next mini lesson.
Yeah. And in fact, we came, from the curriculum, reading processes, comprehension strategies. What do they do when they come to a word they do not recognise? Right? I have to know what strategies. Let me see what they're doing. Have they just got one? So this little man I was talking about, he came to the word layers. He was reading about rainforests. He didn't know how to read the word. And I said, what do you do to try and work out a word? And he said, I sound it out. I don't know. I still don't know what that word is. So he didn't have another strategy for that word. So working towards those things that's what we want to find out. How many strategies have they got for these things, and do their strategies serve them to tackle words that they don't recognise? If they've only got one strategy, it's not enough to serve them. How do they clarify the meaning of a word? So this little man also needed to clarify the meaning of layers. And to do that, his book gave us a little gift. It was in bold. And because it was in bold, it meant that in the diagram, it gave us more information. So this is a little year one boy, and that gave us more information. So that text gave us information to working out what was the meaning of the word. So I was able to bring a whole new strategy there for how to work out the meaning of a word in a non-fiction text that has bold print. And do they self-correct to ensure meaning? So there are 5 actions that we really want to find out about. What strategies do they use to help their reading? What do they know about comprehension strategies? What do they do when they come to a word they don't recognise? How do they clarify the meaning of a word? And do they self-correct to ensure meaning?
It's a bit of gold there, Sharon, I think.
Yeah,
those 5 questions.
Big things that we want to almost have those as our, if we're ever wondering, well, what am I listening for? What am I looking for when I'm listening to a child, when they come to me and I'm listening to them read? They're the things I want to find out about. They're the things that I want to have in my conferring repertoire. That is, when I'm conferring with readers, that's what's at the forefront of my mind.
Have them at the front of your notebook or wherever.
Yes. Well, for me, and that's a good point, how do we anchor that, if that's what we're tuning into. One of the resources that I use and we'll provide that as well. It's already up on the Teachific site, but the things to think about as we are moving through a conference, or the elements of it, what I'm really talking about here is knowing what to observe. So that's that process, the observe. And on my little conferring notes format that I have, I've actually got those questions listed there for me as a reminder of what is it that I'm tuning into? What am I looking for? What's most useful to look for?
This is an A4 sheet with a grid on it, and it is for one per child.
Yes, yes.
And it's got those questions on it.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
And I'll talk a little bit more about when I talk about the actual process of a reading conference, or the elements of a reading conference.
Yep.
I'll talk about that a little bit more then. But yes, so those five questions are really the essentials of what I need to have in my mind if I want my reading conference to focus, as I think it should, and is most helpful to readers on what actions are they taking. That's what we're trying to catch here, is what actions is the reader, what actions have they got under control, and where do they need more actions to take? In what area do they need more actions?
Yep.
Here's the point I was trying to get to. I'm rambling on because I'd lost my point, is that that's 5 things that I'm thinking about. I'm not addressing each of those. I can't catch everything about that. But they're the key things for my for my mini lessons and for my conferring. They're things that I've always got in, at the forefront. They're my key pieces. Okay, so
we've got the key questions and we've got the tool that we're using. Should we talk about how that reading conference can help us?
Well,
want to go there first?
Actually, how it can help us. All right. This is probably talking a little bit more about the structure of it. So what are the things that are most going to help us? Like, what things would I include in a conference, and what things would I, might not be so helpful? I really just want to talk about what are the things that for every conference I would try to have these elements in there. So first up, planning. Planning for a conference. So of course, when I first begin begin reading conferences, planning for them, I don't have, I'm moving towards that. I don't have all of that set in concrete yet. But a reading conference isn't just an out of the blue, every now and then, maybe I better do one because I need a bit of information. I actually need to plan for reading conferences. Number 1, to happen every day. And number 2, that I should have a plan of who do I need to meet with, because some children I need to confer with them more often than some other children. So there are some children I need to check in with more frequently, more regularly than others, not because I want that to be inequitable for children, but because for some children I just need a more frequent touch in with them. So who I'm going to confer with, and in some, even before that, sometimes we might actually just have a day set for children, across a fortnight, to say, on this day, that I'm always going to catch up with you for a reading conference. So I want to have a plan around that, because if I don't have a plan, it's so easy for it to just not be part of. I need to have such a good plan that it says, this is how important it is that I'm going to make this happen. So in planning, other things to think about is, so who am I going to meet with? What's going to be my focus? But my focus, so it might be that I actually want to just check in on how we're going with all those mini lessons that I'm doing. So if I'm bringing if I've noticed that the class is needing, say for example, I want to have children, really picturing in their minds what it is that the author is saying in the words so that they can better understand what they're reading. If I'm doing that with the whole class in the reading conference, I might want to check in on how that's going for everybody. But my focus will probably also be, what is it that for that child might also be their goal? And I'm still to talk to how we set good goals there. So let me get to that one in a moment. Yep. I need tools for record keeping. So I have and will share with everybody this conferring sheet that I use for notes. But we have to have some kind of a record of conference. And I find that the best place to keep that record of the conference is in children's reader's notebook or their reading journal. They should have a copy of it as well. It's not just information for me. It should be, this is the children's story of them as a reader. And so not only should it be recorded somewhere where we can keep a track of that for that child, but also that the child should be able to refer to it. It should be recorded in a way where the child, we can say, have open your, like, what's your reading goal at the moment? And they should be able to find, there's a section in their notebook, or if it's on a pro forma like I use, the goal is on that sheet. If they've got that sheet there, they can be reminded of what their reading goal is. Now, the student should also be prepared for a conference. And by being prepared, it means that they'll bring their book box or folder or kit with whatever material they're reading at the time. So this is what we talked about earlier. I'm not bringing the text now saying, okay, I need you to read this so that I can do a running record to find out.
They're bringing the tantalising books that they are reading.
They're just right.
Just right. Yep.
Let's refer, so tantalise. So this is another distinction to make, actually. People will often say, all right, so is this their levelled book they're bringing? Is this a book that they've just picked that they love and that they want to be able to read? This should be their just right reading material. Whether it's levelled, whether it's not levelled, they have chosen this, they're reading it, and we have already checked in, and my reading conference can actually be a good time to check whether what the child is reading is they're reading with accuracy and understanding.
So one or two books in their folder could be just right books. Others could be, a book of high interest to them.
But my conferring is going to be about seeing what they are doing as a reader with books that are just right for them.
Yeah, so I was just clarifying that, we're zoning in on the just right books for the reading conference.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so just to clarify too that when you talk tantalising texts don't just mean other texts. They don't mean things that we're not in talking about a classroom library with tantalising texts are meaning books that we are choosing to read, but that we need to be able to read them with accuracy and understanding.
Yep.
Yes? Yep. Yeah. Am I saying what you're saying? Or?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Yeah, of course.
I know we're on the same page, but I'm just not sure if I've clarified what you were trying to clarify.
Well, all I'm saying was in their folder of the books that they've chosen from their classroom library, there are one or two books that are specifically they're going to have lined up ready for their reading conference.
What's in their reading collection? We might say that there may be a book in their collection that they can't yet read for themselves that may be challenging, but not so challenging that they can't do any work with it.
No.
So we know that it's our just right books. And actually this came up in conversation the other day, that the more reading strategies the more reading actions we can take, and the more aware we are of the actions we can take, the better we are at choosing books that we can read with accuracy and understanding. So that's where sometimes, people will talk about, the 5-finger rule for choosing a just right book. And that 5-finger rule, I'm just saying this, I'm just going to show how this isn't a useful strategy, because the 5-finger rule says pick a page. If there's 5 words on that page that you don't know, the book's not just right for you. I want students to choose books by using all of their strategies to work out whether this is a book. So what reading processes and which reading comprehension strategies are they using to go, oh yeah, this book is, I am reading this, I'm going to be able to understand this book. I can read this with accuracy because I know about reading punctuation and phrasing it. And so I want to choose books using all of these strategies that I know, not just if the book has got 5 words on that page I can't read, it's not right for me. That's a really narrow way to choose a book.
Yep.
I want to be choosing every book by the fact that I am so aware and I am building such a rich resource of reading skills and strategies that I am going further and further and deeper into every book that I'm reading.
So there's definitely a series of mini lessons in book selection strategies that we're going over with the class, but also when we're conferring with the children, we are then looking at those book selection strategies as well and talking to them about those and referring back to the mini lesson we had.
Yeah.
Is that the sort of thing that
Yes. Well, absolutely. Yeah. But the book selection strategies, we need to really broaden that out.
Yeah.
So we want children to be able to, like, no book, like all books offer challenges for us as readers, even for us as adults. When I pick up a book, if it's a new area, a new topic, a new concept for me in this book, I need to draw on all of my reading process and reading comprehension strategies here to do my best work. And it might be quite challenging. And that is what a good reader is doing, is going, okay, what strategies am I choosing and using here to help me better read this text? So we want children to understand that choosing books, it doesn't necessarily just mean that the book looks easy or looks hard or looks this or looks that. It's what am I bringing to it? And my reading conference is really bringing, as are my mini lessons, are really bringing to our students what is the work that the reader is doing here to make wonderful sense and meaning and insights into this text, and not just, okay, you read that. When you read, oh, that sounded good. What strategy? What were they doing? What were they thinking? What have they got out of this? Our conferences and mini lessons are really there to teach us how to tackle texts.
So that's a real bit of gold, I think, Sharon. You know, people could go back on what you've just said and really replay it and get a deeper understanding of what it's all about.
Yeah, and that it's not just about tackling this text, it's about what am I doing in this text what strategy, process, understanding that I can bring to any text.
Yep.
To make it work, so because we're always going to have texts that are going to have words that we don't know, remember one of the 5 questions, what do I do when I come to a word that I don't recognise? I shouldn't just say that book's not right for me because there's 5 words there that I don't instantly recognise. I'm drawing on a world of strategies here to recognise words. If in conferences, in mini lessons, I'm being taught a whole range of ways to tackle words that I don't recognise.
And the whole class would be talking about these when we're sharing and reflecting. We'd be talking about, what strategy did you use? What did I use?
Yes.
So that would
and
be...
how did I use it?
Yep.
Because that's, at the end of the day, it's how did I use it and what did that help me to do?
Yep.
So I haven't even... So planning. Oh, wow.
Right.
Yes, I'm still at the planning. So students would bring the book that they're reading.
Yep.
The books. And what would I get them to read to me? I'd say, what are you going to read to me? Choose, for my younger readers, which book there are you choosing to read to me? Show me what you're doing as a reader. So just coming back to that book selection, that may very well be the time where I might say, oh, look at all the things you're doing with that book as a reader. I'm going to record that one. If it's a reception 1 child, I'm going to record that in your book. That's a book you're reading, with, you can read it with such, I can give all that feedback with fluency, and you sound like the character when you read, and you can tell me all about it, and you made lots of discoveries, and here's all the things, and I can list that as, right, it's a book you've got. And so I might help the child right there. So what are we going to choose next? What's the next book that you need? So I might match them to some other, help them in matching, helping them choose their next book. It might also mean that they get to read something that is more challenging for them that they're still working with. So, right, so, or I might also say, we've been working on such and such, or I can see your goal here is to do this. Show me how you're doing that in your reading. For our older readers, they'll have chapter books, and my goodness, that's what we're really trying to chase down for a lot of our children, is really moving into chapter books and really getting them thinking and doing that reading across longer texts, informational texts, imaginative texts, varieties of. So I might also be, suggesting other places for them to go in their reading as well. They should bring their reading journal or reader's notebook with them, because there will be conference notes in there, and we want to look at those. I want to go back to the last lot of conference notes. I want to see what their goal is that they're working on. They should also know what that goal is. There should be a reading log of some sort for our older, I said for receptions 1s, we would record a lot of the books that they're reading, but for our 2s and up, they should have a log of what they're reading. So I can see not just what books they've finished, but what they've been reading from day to day. So on a reading calendar, so how's that reading going? Wow, you've been reading this book over the last fortnight. George's Marvellous Medicine. Now you're up to chapter 15. Fantastic. Read on from there. Talk to me about. And
we'll put a link to examples of reading logs on the Teachific site.
Yes.
In the show notes, Sharon.
Yes, yeah. And by them bringing their reading journal, we can also see any surveys they've done, whether it's a motivation to read survey or how they feel about themselves as a reader, or any written responses they've got to their book. So if they've come with George's Marvellous Medicine and in a weekly written response, responding to their reading, they've been writing about George's Marvellous Medicine, share some of that with me, or I can see some of that, so that I'm not just asking questions about today's reading, that they can share some of these things about themselves as a reader. Right, that's just the planning start.
And the next one is referring to previous goals and gathering information.
Yeah. So this observation piece that we've just been talking about with the 5 questions, so I'm really going to sample their reading and I'm going to refer back to, so what's your goal? So from your last conference, what are your goals that you're working on at the moment? I should have left them with a goal from my last conference, or on our reading calendars, we've actually got, what are students' reading goals for the month? For some children, it's I want to finish X number of chapter books, or I want to, read 3 books by this author, which might include picture books or whatever it is.
Usually one goal, Sharon, or is it a multiple goals?
We would never live with just one goal.
No.
If one goal, and our goals.
I mean, at a time,
Yeah. I've got a few goals as reader on the go. I've got goals that have come up in our mini lessons. And so on our good reader chart of mini lessons that we've been doing, they're also goals, because they're the things that after the mini lesson I'm practicing those in my reading.
Yep.
So there's class goals that we've been talking about. Then I've got some individual goals. Some of those are definitely coming up through a reading conference. What's a specific reading goal for me? And then I've got those personal goals of how much I want to be reading and what kinds of books that I'm going to be reading. So, I want to push it out into those areas as well. So the reading conference, the planning part, of course, is happening beforehand, but the first thing I really want to do is look back, what's the goal, and then observe. Let me sample. I want to listen to them read. So I want to hear them read. They might, before they begin reading, they might talk about what they've been working, what their goal has been, and that I'm going to see that happen as they're reading. So I'm looking for evidence of that progress. So as they read, they should be showcasing. They're going, I've been really working on, creating pictures in my mind as I read so that I can better understand what I'm reading. And I've been paying attention to punctuation so that those, each phrase or each chunk is giving me meaning. This is the kind of talk. This is a Year 3 child that I was working with the other day. This was their goal. This was exactly their goal, and so that's what I was seeing. That's what I was to be looking for. I want to keep a record of that. Now, hearing them read is, as we say, that opportunity to see what they're doing as they read. So my observation is really listening to them read, and I'm specifically tuning in to goals. What have we been doing in class? What mini lessons have we been doing, so that I can make observations around that and those 5 questions that we talked about. What are they doing with comprehension strategies, reading process, when they come to a word they don't know, how do they clarify, and how are they self-correcting? So from there, and we wonder why, oh my gosh, how long does a reading conference go for? Listen to how long I'm talking about it. It doesn't, what I've just described there, that observing, listening to them read,
goes quickly.
Might be a minute.
Quickly.
It just might be a minute. And that's enough for me to gather a load of information. And so I don't have to have a record of everything there, but I want to notice some things. So my observation, listening to them read, is I am observing and I'm noticing. From there, I'm really going to actually make a decision about what am I going to feed back to the child that they're doing well?
Yes, yep.
And how they're going. So give them some feedback around that, around their goal and what I can see that they're doing, what actions, successful actions they're taking. I'm also going to make a decision based on what I'm observing about something that a new action or revising an action, so a skill or strategy that isn't yet in place. So I now want to decide on something. So this phase is called decide/teach. So I'm going to choose something, a new strategy that I'm going to explain is really going and how it's going to help them. So I've noticed you doing this. This is what I know you're ready to learn. So I'm going to bring a great strategy that I'd like you to try. So a new strategy or skill that I'd like you to try is this. And so I'll explain it. And then I'm going to demonstrate how that works in the child's text. So let's say, and I'll use this one because it's a common one and people will relate to this instantly. We've got a child, they read and they're not paying attention to any punctuation. So I'm going to, and in a minute of reading, it might even be 30 seconds of reading. A minute is actually a long time. And that's why, we're saying, well, how do I get through all these conferences? I don't need a lot of sampling of the text to know. So if they're not using punctuation, if they haven't been reading, and let's say we haven't had any mini lessons about this, so I'm going to demonstrate now. I'm going to say, I notice when you're reading that you're not reading the punctuation, and I then show reading it with the punctuation. So I'll just take a sentence. I'm not going to take the whole text, a sentence or two, because there might only be full stops here, and so I need more than one sentence. So then I'm going to show what it looks like. So the new strategy is we're going to read the punctuation. And this is what it looks like. And then I'll also explain how that's going to help them as a reader. So when you read the punctuation, it helps you make sense of what the author is trying to say. So it will better help you understand what you are reading. So then I'll get them to practice. So I might do another one and say how that helped me. So what that sentence means is...
So you're really working as a team on this?
Yes, using their text.
Using their text, of course.
And then I will get them to keep reading, practicing the new strategy.
Yep.
So I'll say, so I want you to read the next sentence, or, I'll just make a decision on what they need. So it might just be the next sentence or the next two. I want you to practice using the punctuation and then telling me what you understand, how that helped you understand what the writer was trying to say. So we're practicing, you're getting them to practice the thought processes, the action to take to help them be more successful as a reader. So we're practicing, so they watch you do it, listen to you, describe it. They get to practice it and they get to feel what it's like. You get to give some more feedback and adjustment on that, and then that becomes the reading goal. I've just chosen one thing.
Yep.
Or I've combined it with maybe another reading goal they've got. I can combine things. Our best goals combine more than just one thing. So this one, of course, has combined reading the punctuation and how does that help me better understand?
So there's the two goals.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's reading what's on the page and how that helps me to understand. So then to set the goal, I would say to the child, so what is your new goal? And in their words, that's what I would record.
In their words.
In their words.
Yep.
Because, and if it's confused what they've said, I'm not writing that down. I'm writing it down, but I need them to articulate it. I'm writing down what it is that, the I can't even spit it out. They have to know what it is that the goal is before I can write it down. So that's my checking point. That's to find out, do they understand what the new action is and why they're doing it? And once they can articulate that, then I write that down. On this reading conference notes sheet that I also use, I have a final column. So there's actually a few other features on there. Let me just go through 5 columns across. The first one is the date. Then it's that observation. So observation and noticing, sampling the reading, listening to the child read. Then it's the box decide, teach box. Then it's the goal box. And then the final column is a little one called the goal status. And in there are 3 variants: early, on the way, solid. And I can simply circle one of those 3. Where are they with that goal?
Yep.
Is it early? They're well on the way with it, or is that now solid? So when I come back to this when I confer with the child the next time, they can really think about, or they can show me, and I can look at, whoa, what are we going to say about that goal now? You were early, you are well on the way with that now. You're using that really effectively. Another time, I'm going, a few conferences later, that goal back there, that is so solid now, let's circle that. So I've got this picture, I've got this record that a sheet like this can help us organise that recording and give really strong picture not only to you of what the child's doing, but to the child themselves. It does also include adding in there what text they're reading at the time too, so that we can see what text they were working with. Sometimes in a reading conference, early on in a year, some of the books that we're finding students might be working with in the reading conference aren't just right for them. So that's the time to use the time to help them find a better book to work with. Because if they're working with a book that is just too hard for them and they aren't reading with accuracy and understanding, are they growing as the reader? Let's match them. Let's get them with something that's going to help them really grow well. Because if we find when we're at the decide teach column that we go, oh, there's too many things here to work with because the book is just too hard, we need to make sure that there's plenty that they're working with. From that observation, we have to go, wow, they're using lots of strategies there. So that gives us, I know I've taken a long time to describe that, but it's important to know how we can transform that experience of reading out loud and showing processes into determining where can I just have some on-the-spot teaching to advance my reading processes or my reading comprehension and me as a reader.
Yep. So that's goal setting. Is there any more on goal setting, Sharon, or was that...
No, that's probably about it. But we do need to, no, you're right, there is something else. During independent reading time, it's really useful for children to automatically have out their reading journal open to the page where their reading goal is, so that they can be reminded, what is it that I'm working on at the moment?
Remind themselves.
Yes.
Yep.
Because That's why you've written it. That's why you've recorded it, not for your records, but to help them.
Yep.
Yes, you want it for your records, but you also want it, more importantly, you want this as an action. The goal is an action for that child.
Yep.
So you want them to keep taking that action. How do I remember to take it? By looking back, looking at what's my goal at the moment. And it's in my words, so that will make sense to me. I've seen it, I've done it with the teacher. So right here, right now, I know what it is that I'm doing because I already had a practice during the conference. Now, all of those things, that practicing, that goal setting, that decide, teach, and setting a goal is actually the same process we use in a mini lesson. We decide, and what do we decide to teach in a reading mini lesson? Things we've noticed that our readers need. Our reading conferences are really going to let us know, wow, every child in the class will benefit from. And every child in the class will benefit from, go back to those things that we talked about in the first place, that reading, how we choose books, reading processes and monitoring strategies, comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, decoding knowledge, those 5 questions, that's what drives those mini lessons.
Because there's a dual purpose here. There's the child and their own goals that they're working on for their independent reading,
Yep.
but there's also the teacher and the mini lessons that are coming out of all this information.
Yeah. And those goals, those actions, good reader actions, are on the good reader chart.
Okay, yep.
So as a reader, during independent reading time, I've got all the good reader actions on the chart that I have seen a teacher demonstrate in a mini lesson, and I've practiced each of those during a mini lesson with the teacher.
Yep.
I've practiced them. That's why they're on the chart, because I've seen it in action. I've heard the teacher describe what it is and how it helps me as a reader. And I've tried it out as the teacher is either, as we're reading an enlarged text, or in the read aloud. As I'm listening, I'm practicing those strategies. So I've got the good reader chart, there's goals on there and actions for me as a reader. In my conferring, in my reading journal, reader's notebook, on my reading conference notes page, I've got a goal in my own words that I've seen how it works, I understand why it's important, and I've had a practice of it already. And then I've articulated what it is that I'm about to do. So I've got all these things supporting me to practice. So here I'm just going to come back to reading conferences, because people will say, okay, even if they do only take 5 minutes, how do I get through every child every day? Well, you're not going to get through every child every day. That wouldn't be it. How do I get through children, more than once in a term? The power of the reading conference comes strongly on the back of my mini lessons. So that correlation that I've just talked about, children should come to conferences knowing how that works, because they've lived that experience a lot during mini lessons. So we've got the talk from mini lessons really being mirrored in these conferences as well. I can also, we can have a one-on-one, the child comes to me at a designated area in the classroom for the conference, but I can also use roving conferences really effectively. Roving, students are at their tables or at their spot reading, because my conferences are happening as everyone's engaged in independent reading.
And every
I
child.
don't think I've even said that, Phil. Have we even said that today? That's when conferences are happening.
Well, if we hadn't, we're telling everyone now.
Oh my goodness, this is my head, just flooding out with not always, making it entirely logical.
No, but when we're doing the roving conferences during independent reading,
yes,
every child can have their goal in front of them.
Yes, so if their reading journal's open,
and the reading log,
and their reading log, because that reading log is another really critical piece that lets me have eyes on are they reading every day?
Yep.
Are they? I can notice things like, okay, we've been reading this book so if I've got like a reading calendar, we've been reading this book for a month and we're still only on page 10. In fact, if I notice that, I've clearly not had my eyes on this reader because that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
But a roving conference means everyone has got things out, children have got their things out on the tables, and I can go around and look at those things, and I can pop down next to you, Phil, and just say, right, it's been a while since I've conferred with you, or it's been a couple of weeks. Just show me, how are you going with your goal, with this goal here? And you might just read me a sentence or two, or, for 30 seconds, and I'll go and I'll say, show me how you're going with that. And they might have been early, and I can go, oh, wow, where do you think you are with that now? And they go, I think I'm pretty solid with that, sounding like it. So I can, during a week, I might choose a couple of days to be just roving conferences.
Yep.
So that I can actually have my eyes on everybody.
Yep.
During the share time, when we have children reflecting and sharing at the end of independent reading, it is actually a good time. Not only are they recording, keeping a log of what they've read that day, if they're year 2 and up, but it's also a good time for them to look back at their goal and reflect on how well am I going with that, and to share out with somebody, do a turn and tell. I just want to show you how I'm going with this goal. Watch me, listen to me, read this goal. So then it's not just me conferring. This is me showing how I'm doing it, and I can, make a judgment on me and that goal. I might even write myself a little note there. So then it becomes, this isn't just it depends on how often the teacher gets to confer with me for it to make any use or for it to have any benefit. It should be an ongoing, integral part of me as a reader. So this conference is, it's not just it's my turn for a conference again. This should be, it's my everyday ongoing piece, and it isn't just reliant on the teacher coming back to check in. We want children choosing and using these strategies and skills that we're bringing to them.
Well, I think, Sharon, this might be our longest podcast ever.
Oh, true.
But I think we've actually got to the heart. Don't you think? It feels like we've really got to the heart, to the real critical parts of the teaching of reading.
And actually, not in defence for a long podcast, but it is one of the aspects of our teaching that whenever we start talking about reading conferences probably gets the most questions. has the most wonderings and ponderings and even some frustrations about how do I get this working. And I'm hoping that in a very long-winded way, I've been able to clarify some of the reasons for why we have a reading, why we confer with our readers, and that it isn't just happening in these one-off, when I get to sit with the child at these times, that all of these actions that they're taking as a reader, we're bringing actions to them all the time through mini lessons and anchoring those, but that the reading conference really allows children the opportunity to see in writing the things that have been caught about them as readers, and knowing specifically what further actions they can take that will really grow them.
Well, I think we might end off on that, because I think growing them as a reader is, if you get those reading conferences going in this way, you are just going to grow those children phenomenally.
Yes,
yes. And I think we will just finish off there. But I do encourage people to go back on this podcast and just rewind and go over specific bits, because there are some real bits of gold there to try and understand what's actually going on in that reading conference, or what could be going on in that reading conference that's going to make it such a valuable, strong part of the teaching of reading for those children.
Yes, yeah.
Or learning to read for those children.
Yeah, and I'm also very aware, which is something that maybe in a down the track, seeing what does it look like as, seeing a reading conference in action.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Can be really useful, and maybe we can set that up. And look, if that's something that you feel is of interest, maybe let us know. Get in touch with us about that. So that we can know, because listeners, it's like there's a lot of things that I would like to be able to do, and I don't always have a life or a day long enough to do all the things that so the things that people would find most useful, I'm really happy to follow up with those. Yeah.
Okay. Now, we might just skip over some things here, Sharon, just to wind up. The tool is definitely the conferring with readers template. We won't talk about that again.
And it's not that that's the only template, but I think it's a
good one.
It's one that, yes, people can access, and it will make more sense of what I've talked about.
And maybe just quickly, one text you'd like to just give us the name of. We won't have time to go through it, but
no, we won't. Actually, this idea of just bringing texts today, I'm going to just make a connection with why it's important to bring texts, and why we've built this bit into the podcast is because here is an example of why it's so important to bring texts to students, just like we do to you. So on one day in this last week, in lessons that I was modelling, one of the texts that I brought to a Year 1 class was the poem Dingle Dangle Scarecrow. I had it as an enlarged format. It brought a whole lot of new vocabulary to students. Scarecrow, for some students, they'd never seen a scarecrow. The chickens roosting. What did it mean for chickens roosting? So,
what year level was that?
Year 1.
Yep.
And then not only did it bring all of that, but we read together. Each verse, out of each 8 lines, 6 of them are repeated in each verse. So there was always this joining in capacity in there. And then we had children acting it out. So that was just bringing one text in one. We just read it for a short amount of time. as part of the mini lesson. So just bringing that text in another class for my mini lesson, because this was a lesson where I'm not the ongoing teacher in there. So I've brought in a read aloud to this mini lesson, and it happened to be Star of Del Toro, the second book in the series called Two Moons. And I was just using a piece of that text, in fact, just part of chapter 1, for us to practice a reading strategy. After I'd read that text and as students were moving off to independent reading, 3 children in that class said, "Oh, could that be my next book to read?" Fabulous. Just because I'd brought it. So the really special thing was that I'd actually taken 4 copies of that book into the room for their classroom library for them to keep. So 3 children took that book straight away as their next book to read.
Fantastic.
So just using that as an example of the importance of bringing texts to our students, and why we continue to do that as on the podcasts, not only particular titles, but the why we do that.
Critical part of our teaching.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon, for sharing everything today. Just go back and listen to some of those gems, folks.
Yes. And have a cuppa or something after all of that, because I know that that's a load of information. Maybe we could have split that into 2, but you can split that into however many segments.
And we're willing to help out if you want to contact us on our contact page or in the Facebook group. Just sing out, folks. Thank you, Sharon, for...
Oh, sorry. Could I just say one last thing? I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, because conferring with readers and tracking readers in that way is such, if you're a leader in a school and you're thinking, that's like, that's the kind of information we want to catch. And it would be good to have that in a way that is consistent across a school. That reading conference notes sheet that I've been talking about, in some of the schools I'm working, they have that as a standard format. Doesn't mean they have to do it on the sheet, but all the information is used consistently in reading conference notes. And some schools even have it where they'll have the grade, school name and grade level on the sheet, so that therefore it's a school document. It's a consistent and critical part of the transformative tracking that's happening in the school. Sorry, last word, done.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being with us today. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.